The wind howled through the dry fields of New Mexico, carrying the smell of dust and rain. The sky hung low and gray, and the sound of thunder rolled in the distance. A rancher named Ethan stood near his barn, tightening the ropes that held the horses. He was a quiet man, strong and calm, the kind of person who had spent his whole life working under the sun. But that evening something strange was about to disturb the peace he guarded so carefully. As Ethan turned toward the house, he saw movement near the fence. A figure stumbled through the tall grass, and a woman, covered in dirt, her clothes torn from the wind and thorns. She was shaking, her hair tangled and her face pale with fear. Ethan froze for a moment, unsure if she was real or just a shadow from the storm. The woman's voice broke the silence. Please help me," she whispered, her breath uneven. "They'll kill us all, please." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He took a slow step forward. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you're safe here." "Who's after you?" She looked around as if afraid someone might hear her. "They know I ran," she said in a trembling voice. "They'll come for me. And anyone who helps me." Ethan reached out his hand, wanting to calm her. But as she moved closer, he noticed a mark on her wrist, a deep bruise shaped like rope burns. His fingers trembled as he reached for her arm, but he quickly pulled back, not wanting to scare her further. For a man known for his strength, that small act of fear surprised even him. "Come inside," he said softly. "You look half frozen." The woman hesitated but followed him toward the ranch house. Every few steps she turned her head, as though expecting someone to appear from behind the trees. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a lantern. Ethan poured her a cup of water and placed it in her trembling hands. "My name's Ethan Cole," he said quietly. "You can rest here till morning. No one will harm you under this roof." She stared into the cup, her voice barely a whisper. "My name's Clara. I don't deserve your kindness." "They'll find me. They always do." Ethan frowned but kept his tone calm. "You're safe here," he repeated. "Tell me what happened." Clara's hands shook as she tried to speak. "I worked on the North Ranch," she said. "They weren't good people. They treated everyone like animals. When someone tried to leave, they made sure nobody ever tried again. Last night they caught a man trying to escape. I saw what they did to him and I ran." Her eyes filled with tears, and Ethan felt a wave of pity and anger rise inside him, not toward her, but toward whoever had made her so afraid. He knew the land well. There was a ranch up north run by a family known for cruelty, but he never thought it was as bad as the rumors. He sat across from her, keeping his voice low. "You did the right thing running. You shouldn't go back." Clara looked at him, her eyes wide and desperate. "You don't understand," she said. "They'll come here. If they find me with you, they'll hurt you too." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not letting anyone chase a scared woman out into the storm. Not tonight." Lightning flashed outside, followed by the crack of thunder. The house shook slightly. Clara flinched and covered her face with her hands. Ethan stood and walked to the window. In the distance, the road stretched empty under the dark clouds. But he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, watching. He checked the shotgun hanging above the fireplace, not out of aggression but protection. Then he threw another log into the fire. The orange glow filled the room, warming the air. Clara sat close to the heat, her eyes fixed on the flames as if trying to erase the memories haunting her. Minutes passed before she spoke again. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know who I am." Ethan looked at her, his weathered face calm. "Because someone helped me once," he said simply. "When I came home from the war, I had nothing. A stranger gave me food and a bed. I learned that kindness is what keeps people human." Clara lowered her head. Tears rolled down her cheeks silently. For the first time in years, someone spoke to her without shouting, without fear. She wanted to trust him, but the memories of cruelty still clung to her like chains. Outside, the wind howled louder. The horses neighed restlessly in the barn. Ethan went to check on them, taking a lantern with him. The rain had started, tapping against the roof like soft footsteps. As he reached the barn door, he froze. There were fresh footprints in the mud, not his, not Clara's. Someone had been there. Ethan's pulse quickened. He raised the lantern higher, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing but rain. Still, the tracks were real. Someone had been watching. He hurried back to the house, his boots heavy with mud. Clara looked up, alarmed by his face. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just making sure the horses are calm." But his tone betrayed him. Clara stood, her voice shaking. "They're here, aren't they?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He didn't want to scare her, but he couldn't lie. "Maybe," he said softly, "but we'll be fine. This place is strong." She backed away from the window, her body trembling. "You don't understand. They don't stop. They don't forgive." Ethan walked closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now, Clara. I won't let anyone harm you." His voice was steady, but his eyes told another story. Behind the calm, he was afraid too. Not for himself, but for her. He had seen fear before during his years in service, but this was different. This was the kind of fear that lived deep inside someone's bones. The night grew darker. The storm raged harder. Ethan locked the doors and sat near the window, keeping watch. Clara finally drifted to sleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Every time thunder rolled, she stirred, whispering in her dreams, "Don't let them find me." Ethan's heart ached. He didn't know her full story yet, but he knew she had suffered more than most people could bear. He promised himself that when morning came, he'd find a way to help her. Maybe take her to the sheriff or help her start over somewhere far from here. Hours passed slowly. The fire burned low and the wind began to ease. Just before dawn, Ethan heard a sound, and faint but clear. A horse neighing, followed by the crunch of boots outside. He stood quickly and looked through the window. 3 riders were coming down the muddy road, lanterns swinging from their saddles. He took a deep breath. It was time to decide whether to face them or hide her. Inside, Clara woke up, sensing something was wrong. Her eyes widened as she saw Ethan's face near the window. "They found me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They'll kill us all." Ethan turned toward her slowly. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the door handle. Not to surrender, but to protect. "Stay here," he said. "No matter what happens, don't move." The sound of horses grew louder. The air was thick with tension. Clara covered her mouth to muffle her sobs, her body shaking. Ethan stepped out onto the porch, the cold wind hitting his face. He looked out at the 3 shadowed figures approaching through the mist. His heart pounded, but he stood tall, the same way he did when danger came before. Behind him, Clara pressed her hand against the window, tears in her eyes. She had never seen anyone risk their life for her before. She could only whisper one prayer: that morning would come soon, and that this stranger's kindness wouldn't cost him everything. And as the riders drew closer, Ethan's hands shook, not from weakness, but from the heavy weight of what was coming next. The first light of dawn was still hidden behind the mountains when Ethan stood on the porch, facing the 3 riders. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and mist curled above the wet ground like smoke. His heart pounded in his chest, but his eyes stayed calm. Inside the house, Clara watched through the window, every muscle in her body trembling. The men rode closer, their coats dark with rain. The one in front, tall, broad, with a heavy hat pulled low, stopped a few feet away. His voice carried across the yard, rough and cold. "Morning, stranger," the man said. "We're looking for a woman. Came through here last night. Small dark hair, wearing a torn brown dress. You seen her?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He stood still, the water dripping from his hat brim. He thought carefully before speaking. "No woman came this way," he said slowly. "Only me and the horses here." The man's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that? Tracks lead this way. You wouldn't want to lie to us, rancher." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "You're welcome to check the road," he said. "But you won't find anyone here." Behind the curtain, Clara pressed her hand over her mouth to stop her breathing from being heard. Every word made her heart beat faster. She could see the men's faces, hard, unfriendly, and she knew they would not stop easily. The leader spat into the mud. "If we find out you're hiding her, you'll regret it," he said. "She stole from us." "Dangerous woman." Ethan's eyes flickered slightly, but he didn't show emotion. "Dangerous," he repeated. "Doesn't look that way from what I've heard." The man leaned forward in his saddle. "You heard wrong." Then, after a long pause, he turned his horse and signaled the others. "We'll check down the valley. If she comes by, you let us know." Ethan nodded once. "I'll do that." They rode off slowly, their horses splashing through puddles. Ethan stood still until their shapes disappeared into the fog. Only when the last echo of hoofbeats faded did he exhale deeply. His hands, which had been shaking, now rested steady at his sides. He turned back toward the house. Clara was standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "You lied for me," she whispered. "They could have hurt you." Ethan walked past her into the kitchen, setting his hat on the table. "You need rest," he said quietly. "And food. You haven't eaten since yesterday." She shook her head. "You don't understand. They won't stop. They'll come back once they realize I didn't go down the valley." Ethan poured her a bowl of warm soup and set it down. "Then we'll be gone before they do." Clara looked up, confused. "Gone? Where?" Ethan's voice was firm but calm. "There's a small town about 20 miles west. I've got friends there. You'll be safe with them, good people. They'll help you start over." Clara hesitated. The thought of running again made her stomach twist, but something about Ethan's words gave her a small sense of hope. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked softly. "You don't even know me." Ethan gave a faint smile. "I don't have to. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't need a reason." For the first time in days, Clara smiled. A weak, fragile smile, but real. She nodded and began helping him pack supplies: bread, water, and some blankets. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a soft golden glow over the wet land. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of earth and hope. By noon, they were ready. Ethan saddled his horse and helped Clara up onto the second one. She moved slowly, still weak, but her eyes looked brighter than before. As they rode out across the open fields, the sky began to clear, revealing streaks of sunlight breaking through the clouds. The ride was long and silent at first. The only sounds were the clop of hooves and the whisper of the wind. Clara looked around at the wide land. Endless fields, broken fences, small streams shining in the light. For the first time in years, she felt free, though fear still lingered like a shadow behind her. After a few hours, they stopped by a creek to rest. Ethan handed her a canteen of water. "We'll stop in town by nightfall," he said. "You can stay with my friend's family. They'll take care of you." Clara took a sip and nodded. "And you? What about you?" "I'll head back," he said. "Got work to do on the ranch." Clara looked at him sadly. "They'll come back there. They'll think you helped me." Ethan smiled faintly. "I'll manage. I've handled worse storms." She looked at him, unsure how to respond. Something inside her wanted to say thank you, but the words felt too small for what he was doing. So she stayed quiet, watching the water flow past, carrying leaves downstream. As the sun began to lower, they rode again. The road turned through a narrow valley where the shadows grew long. Everything was peaceful, until Ethan noticed something on the ridge above them. A flash of movement, a horse. Then another. He pulled the reins sharply, stopping both horses. "Clara," he said quietly, "we're not alone." Her eyes widened. "They found us?" "Maybe. Stay close." They moved faster, the horses galloping through the narrow path. The sound of hoofbeats echoed behind them. Clara's heart raced. She could see figures in the distance following. The wind whipped her hair across her face, and tears blurred her vision. She didn't know how long they could keep running. After a few minutes, Ethan turned sharply off the road toward an old canyon where the rocks hid the trail. He slowed the horses under a ridge and motioned for silence. They waited, breathing hard. The riders passed by above, their voices faint in the distance. After a long moment, the sound faded again. Ethan let out a slow breath. "We'll stay here till dark," he said. "Then we'll move." Clara nodded, still shaking. "They almost caught us." Ethan looked at her kindly. "Almost doesn't count. You're still safe." They sat under the rocks until the sky turned deep blue. The stars began to appear, bright and clear. Clara looked up at them, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. "I forgot how beautiful the sky can be," she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. "That's the thing about freedom. You start noticing the small things again." She looked at him then, her eyes soft. "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "Just live a good life. That'll be enough." When the night grew darker, they set off again, riding under the stars. By midnight, the lights of a small town appeared in the distance. It looked quiet, with smoke rising from chimneys and dogs barking faintly. They stopped outside a small wooden house. Ethan dismounted and knocked on the door. A woman opened it, older, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Ethan Cole," she said in surprise. "What brings you here this late?" Ethan smiled. "Grace, I need your help. This young lady needs a place to stay for a while." The woman looked at Clara, then back at Ethan. "Of course. Come in, dear. You look half-starved." Clara stepped inside, her hand shaking. The smell of fresh bread and wood smoke filled the air. Grace led her to a chair and gave her a blanket. "You're safe now," she said softly. Ethan stood in the doorway watching her settle in. Clara looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude and sadness. "You're leaving," she said. He nodded. "You'll be all right here. These folks are good people." Clara stood and walked toward him. "I'll never forget what you did for me," she said. "You saved my life." Ethan smiled gently. "You saved yourself when you chose to run. I just gave you a place to rest." He tipped his hat and turned to go. Clara stood at the door, watching as he mounted his horse. The moonlight touched his face, and for a moment, she wanted to call out, to ask him to stay, to say thank you one more time. But the words wouldn't come. Ethan looked back once, gave a small nod, and rode off into the night. The sound of hooves faded into the distance until all that remained was the soft wind and the quiet of safety. Clara stood there for a long time, holding the blanket close. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear but from something new, hope. For the first time in years, she believed there might be a future waiting for her, far from pain, far from fear. And somewhere out on the open land, a lone rancher rode back toward his home, the dawn just beginning to rise behind him. The light of a new day shining on a heart that had done what was right, even when it was hard, because sometimes true courage isn't found in fighting. It's found in kindness.